There was a time when the word vampire was able to scare people, at least a little bit. But today that's just another word like every other. This is because vampires, once considered as horrible, bloodthirsty, deadly monsters, are now nothing more than another kind of creatures with their positive and negative aspects and, of course, their group of fans. Originally, vampires were just the subject of folklore tales and legends, but the myth started evolving with time, and lots of authors kept writing new stories and novels about them. Literature, movies, and TV shows made sure that the audience could get to know and appreciate these creatures. So the idea of the vampire started to arouse the interest of so many people that it became an actual trend, especially for teenagers and young adults. In fact, it became more popular than what could have been estimated in the past. Before it was possible to give a face to vampires through movies and TV shows, it was up to literature to describe their aspects and habits. So, it's thanks to great literary works that vampires started to get an always new and more dynamic image. In the beginning, vampires were just blood-drinking monsters, but now they're always closer to being like actual humans. They have emotions, a sexuality, and most of all, they can love a human being. How did vampires get from being deadly monsters to being portrayed as immortal teenagers struggling for love? It took many years to change the image of vampires this much. It's possible to say that literature itself made this huge transformation possible. In order to better explain it, we have to divide the entire transformation into several different phases, during which vampires slowly change, becoming as similar as possible to humans. The first step to analyze the image of vampires is to understand where they come from and how they were in the beginning. It's important to remember that a vampire is undead, meaning that he is neither alive nor dead, just stuck in between. Vampires don't have any goal in life, they just go on existing. They only follow their instinct of drinking human blood that they need in order to survive. The specific image of vampires was born in the 18th century in Slavic countries. By the way, legends about similar creatures are as old as mankind itself. At the beginning of the 19th century, vampires became a subject for literary works, and that's the period of time where we can place the birth of the modern vampire. Vampires are still monsters here, but they have at least a few emotions, and most of all, they're intelligent. The modern vampire is a creature of the night who drinks blood from helpless human victims, but at the same time, this vampire is elegant and also able to act like a normal human. Among the literary works about modern vampires, it's important to mention The Vampire by John William Polidori, where the gentleman vampire first appears, and the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker as the most important story ever written about vampires. With the next phase of the analysis, we get to more recent times, with Anne Rice and her saga The Vampire Chronicles, starting with the novel Interview with the Vampire, and going on to present day. By reading the novels of the series, it's easy to notice how the vampires Anne Rice describes are still pretty similar to the ones Polidori and Stoker created almost a century before, even if she added her personal touch. Moreover, it's important to remember that the vampire trend we have today started with the spreading of Anne Rice's novels. With the following phase, we're not going too far from Rice in time, but for sure we get in very distant when it comes to the description of the vampires and most of all their habits. In the Southern Vampire Mysteries series by Charlene Harris, we understand what inspired the creation of the incredibly famous TV show True Blood. A key element of the series is the invention of a synthetic blood that can allow vampires to feed without hurting anyone. Therefore, they can peacefully live among humans and become citizens like everybody else. The vampires that Harris describes are incredibly similar to human beings, at least compared to their predecessors, but they still have some of the characteristics of the original monsters. Despite they're still considered as monsters, they can easily have love and sex relationships with humans. The last phase describes the contemporary vampire, representing the downfall of this literary genre and the decline of the image of vampires in literature. Most of the times, the vampire is represented as a cute immortal boy who falls in love with some human girl. Among the possible examples, the most important one is the Twilight Saga by Stephanie Meyer. The author had a huge success among young female readers that grew even more thanks to the movies based on the novels. By the way, she was highly criticized by anyone who still loves this literary genre as it was before. This is because vampires are creatures of darkness, enemies of the light, but Meyer described them as creatures that sparkle like diamonds in the sunlight. Not everyone who likes literature about vampires actually loves the most recent works on that subject. In fact, most of them seem to be just love stories for young and dreamy girls and nothing more, where the vampire is portrayed like some kind of dark Prince Charming. By reading these kind of stories, it's possible to understand how vampires are entirely different nowadays, as they lost their original image entirely. This is the reason why some of the people who appreciate vampires don't read all the novels written about them in the last few years, ignoring the last evolutionary phase completely, as they try to keep in mind the original idea of the vampire as a dangerous monster.